Lisa and I, we've seen swallowtails in our gardens already. Painted ladies, I just saw some of those last night. They were dancing around them. So we do a lot. Hummingbirds are like so thick, you got to go through like the yard like this to keep them off you, or like they're, and we don't feed them. We don't feed hers up. We just have pollinating flowers that draw different kinds of butterflies and hummingbirds into the gardens. I plant one of these every year too in my herb garden, fennel. Monarchs, I notice, every year get on my fennel, every year. They love it. And so it's just one of those things. Milkweed is good. I'm playing with more and more milkweeds. But I put this one, I don't want milkweed in my herb garden. I want herbs in my herb garden. So I plant strategically for butterflies to attract them. Anyway, that's another one that's a good pollinator for here. I'm starting to play with more and more of the pretty milkweeds. Because milkweed basically, no offense, it's just ugly. So I don't want it just any place. I want it strategically over there where guests don't see it as much. I want to sip my tea and watch the sunset with pretty plants, not weeds. But there's a place for them. And so fence lines, outside edge of a driveway, that's where I put my milkweed stuff. But this, I put some of these directly in my containers because that's just pretty. And it's the same kind of flavor to them. But anyway, we're trying to introduce more and more of those. I don't know yet, because it's so new, which butterflies are attracted to what. I'm still playing with that. But I think I'm a philosophy of the shotgun effect. Just plant a lot of pretty things, and they'll just find their way. And they seem to do that. They seem to naturally gravitate towards their favorite flavor. Lots of insects are kind of like people. Certain people like steak, others like fish, others like chicken, others like nothing but veggies. And so you'll find that your different butterflies have they have certain flavors that they like, and they'll gravitate towards those plants. I brought probably the most famous of all the pollinators, butterfly bush. I brought this one because most butterfly bush are ginormous. I mean, they could fill the greenhouse. I mean, small children, dogs, have been lost in butterfly bush. I mean, they get huge, high maintenance. We're introducing an entire series of butterfly bushes. This is as tall as this one gets, and then it spreads. So we've got some that only get hip high. So there's many, many of them that we're introducing now that we figured out the same flower, but smaller pint-sized form, just maintenance is less of an issue. Very drought hardy, very tough as nails. I mean, talk dirty to it. I mean, just run it over, and you can't kill a butterfly bush unless you overwater it. So kind of watch that one, especially when the rains have come. You'll have to kind of crank your irrigation back right now, or a lot of these pollinators will suffer. They'll stop blooming. They'll turn yellow. You'll need to physically watch how you're irrigating them. So we've come off of June, where we had to up the watering for a few weeks. Remember, it went from 80 to like 105, like that. We had to actually put an extra cycle in, keep things healthy. Now, if you keep that cycle up with the rains and the increased humidity, this plant will tend to yellow on you. Same with, this is a native that just grows wild. Kirkland, Baghdad, all the way out toward this junction, you'll see a tree about 10 to 15 foot tall, kind of multi-stemmed, generally speaking, kind of a big bush or a small tree. This is called desert willow. It's a great native for here. But the hummingbirds love this big tree, big plant. I mean, give it some space. Don't put this right next to the house. This is truly a native. Get it started, get it up to size, and you could cut it off with all water and let it go by itself. This one is called, what's the exact name on this one? This is Timeless Beauty Desert Willow. We figured out the native tends to put a bean on after it gets done flowering, and it focuses on seeds. This one, we've bred that habit out of the plant, so it's less likely to form beans, which means it blooms more. So it's not focused on putting seed reproduction, it's focused on being beautiful, sexy, and gorgeous, and showing off. That's the kind of plant we're trying to find more of, that means more hummingbirds, things will be after it. So it's a summer bloomer. It'll bloom from now through really the fall is when it really shows up. But you'll see a plant with hundreds of these flowers on. Right now, that's desert willow. Just out in the wild, you're walking around, desert willow. Generally speaking, pollinators like a couple colors. Bees, butterflies, things like that. They love blue, irresistible. They can't resist blues, violets, any color of blues and purples they dearly love, and they love yellows and oranges, that kind of. So if you look into plants, generally you'll see they're gravitating towards that. So I brought a selection of plants, blue ones, that I know in my yard attract pollinators, and some yellows and oranges. So let me just show those to you. I've got mainly perennials. Oh, and then I included a couple of them that are just not pollinators. But the birds, I also love birds. So we have a lot of birds of all types. This one I plant, it's not really on any pollinator list, but I think every yard should have one. This is called Autumn Joy Sedum. It's tough, it's like a cactus, very robust. Without the needles, it's very, very soft. It's called Autumn Joy because get about this tall, and the entire top of the plant will be this red color. It's magnificent in the fall of the year. The reason I plant this though, is because the sparrows very early in spring, when they're desperate for seed, the bugs aren't out yet, there's no food source there, they've used up all the seed that were out there. This starts to emerge, they'll use this as a food source. So you'll see 50 little chickadees or sparrows, they'll all land on this plant. Be pecking away at it, they eat the tops of it, and then they just all fly off at once. It's very entertaining, very pretty. It's just like nature at its height. And I'm okay with them eating some of this. It kind of gets beat up in spring, but then I'll fertilize it in March or April. It'll flush, then all the other grasses and things they naturally like anyway will start to erupt with new growth. Then it spreads the pressure out so that they can go eat other stuff as well. And then this thing goes into bloom every fall. So I plant one of these just to attract more birds. Got it planted right next to the pond, and they just like it. One that I think pollinators really need, rosemaries. It blooms in March when nothing else is in bloom. So your bees are coming out then, and they're very hungry. They've been hibernating, and they're desperate. They're looking for anything. And they'll be all over the blue flowers of rosemary. And this is the cookie rosemary. It's just a pretty thing, but I'll plant those out there. I'll actually plant these next to my vegetable garden, my fruiting trees, because you want to pull the pollinators in, because it's hard to get squash to pollinate. Tomatoes, they're just sparse, they're not a lot of flowers, and so the bees just don't naturally come to your plants. Sometimes you got to hand pollinate squashes, pumpkins, cucumbers. But if you get some blue flowers in there amongst your vegetables, they'll naturally be drawn to the blue, and they'll just carry on. They'll keep pollinating your garden. So you'll find that you have better production, larger fruits. One time they'll start to form a fruit and then just fade. That's a pollination issue. Thank you. Fruit trees. I'll plant these next to the fruit trees, and the bees are just all over it. And they kind of go, oh yeah, while I'm here, I'll pollinate the cherries, the apricots, and the nectarines, and the apples, so it's a good way to kind of woo. You can attract more pollinators just with rosemary. It's one of the earliest bloomers that are blue. And it's evergreen. It's pretty. It's just great. It takes full sun. You can't kill this. And you can use it in the kitchen. It just smells good. This is one I have a lot of. This is a weed. We just call it meadow sage. But sages, anytime you see salvia or sage, you know it's a good plant for here. It means it's an herbal plant. So it has a sagey kind of scent to it. It blooms very early. It'll start blooming the end of March, April, through mid-May. Mine's taking a little break. I just trimmed all the spent flowers off. I fertilized it with all-purpose plant food, and it will go back into another show of flowers. If you notice the color, blues and purples, They're all over this plant. And it spreads. It's a wildflower. You'll never have just one. It just naturally will get about this big around by itself, and then it will start to seed, and you'll just see it coming up in places. So this particular sage is the one that I use myself, just because animals don't eat it. The rabbits, deer, javelina, leave it alone. It's a great pollinator, and it spreads by itself. And those are kind of all the things that I want in my backyard, at least. And it's a perennial, comes back every year. Meadow sage. There's quite a few sages. I've got a couple sages here, but this is the good perennial that I just had good experience with. Just pretty. This is as tall as it gets, and it spreads like this. Okay. This is a variety of this. It's called catmint. It gets a little taller, about knee high or so, kind of ball shaped. Mine has been in glorious bloom all spring. It took a break when it got real hot. I just trimmed it back and fertilized it again. It's now setting more flowers. So it's not evergreen. It's about a month in winter when it kind of gets this dead look. And then it's green most of the year though. Great perennial for here, and animals don't eat this. It's less invasive than Russian sage, that tall purple one that's up right now. You're seeing a spiky blue kind of shrub. That one can get kind of weedy. It's also kind of a pollinator, but it's so aggressive. I hate to introduce that particular plant in some parts of my garden because it just wants to take over. This is much easier to maintain and keeps its bounds much better, and a great pollinator. Really super. Animals don't eat it. So blues. Penstemon. Generally our penstemon are reds and whites, light pinks. But penstemons are a native plant, grows wild here, naturalizes, reseeds, comes up, just propagates by itself. It's a great wildflower to introduce into the gardens. I always say put penstemons at the top edge of that wash or that hill or that slope you've got. For those of you in the mountain sides, put at the top, the seed will fall down and just start coming up down there someplace, magically. Penstemons do that. Very drought hardy. Very long green season. And you'll never have just one. Full sun, I mean, just treat it hard and it still grows. It's an amazing little plant. I brought this one because it's very unusual to see purple. You always see reds. And I've got all those colors down there. So we're trying to introduce more and more varieties because they're so good for the mountains of Arizona. They just perform so well. So we're trying to introduce more colors because they all do well. This one is called Scabiosa. This is a butterfly landing pad. If you have this blooming, guaranteed butterflies will be all over it. They can't resist it. They just love the nectar of this. So it only gets this tall, gets nice and full, I mean just like thick. This is a young guy, gal, whatever she is. It's just a nice, full, thick, mounding plant as tall as this and about this big around, and it will load up with so many flowers you can't see the foliage when it's at maturity. So it's a great little perennial flower for here. But it's called Scabiosa or pin cushion flower. I just call it a butterfly landing pad. They just love resting. In the morning, you'll just see butterflies all over this. And then an annual, and we'll finish up with the blues. And I could go on and on with just blues. I just brought some of my favorites that I tend to like that are also pretty, long bloom cycle. The animals generally leave alone. This is, again, salvia, mystic spires. Anytime you see salvia, you know you got a good plant. Hummingbirds love this. Butterflies love this. All the pollinators love salvias. Salvias love full sun. So south side, reflective heat, it's going to like that. It'll bloom even more. The more sun you give this particular plant, the more flowers that you get on it. So it's a great little plant, and it's just pretty. So I'll put this, in fact, let's bring in some of the oranges so I can show you some companion plants. Get rid of this guy here. We'll put him over here. Have you seen a plant right now that's got orange flowers, real big orange flowers. All around town you're seeing a great big vine or big bush. That's a trumpet vine. Great plant for here. Drought hardy, full sun, things leave it alone. I wish I had one in bloom, but as soon as they go in bloom here at the nursery, people buy them. So I went, okay. This is unusual in that it's a tree form. So many folks think they have to put trumpet vine on a trellis or fence. I've actually seen them as hedgerows, just trimmed like a bush. They're very, very versatile. Yavapai College is using them as a ground cover. They just laid a vine out, spread it out. It's about this tall, covered in orange blooms. Tremendous, tremendous pollinator, especially for hummingbirds. They tend to eat it on the migration back home, back south. They'll stop and suck on the nectar as they're migrating back down south. A question?
Is everything you're showing us mostly full sun?
Full sun. Yes. And the reason it's full sun, because plants need the sun to create the sugars to make the photosynthesis to put the flowers on. I could probably go over some more shade lover stuff, but your choices went from here down to, so we can talk afterwards. I wanted to show you this just because, what was I dealing with? Where was it? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Yeah. Isn't that pretty together? I also plant this together. Milkweed with salvia. It just looks, they're companion plants. Take the same kind of soil, same kind of sun. They're pretty. So you can now plant some of these butterfly attractors, and they're pretty enough to actually showcase right at your front door. And so we're trying to find more and more introductions of that benefit. So I've got this combo right there in one of my containers at the house, and it's pretty as can be. And the pollinators are all over. Hummingbirds stop and suck nectar off of it. Yeah.
That's just what I was going to ask. On all these plants, or some of these plants, did you find in containers if I want just pots, so I can move around and go there?
Yeah. We've got just pots in the ground. Wherever I would say most of these are going to do better if you can prepare the soil some. So they aren't quite as tough as the native milkweeds, because they aren't weeds. They're actually propagated to be beautiful. So they need a little more nurturing.
Well, I have rocks with some soil mixed in.
You've got soil. He said he's got rocks with some soil mixed into it. I'm going, wow, I'm jealous. You've got some soil. I got nothing. Actually, what I have, Lisa and I live up in Eagle Ridge, overlooking Prescott Lakes, on a north slope. The most difficult gardening I've ever done, and I have farmed throughout the county, much less gardened. Heavy clay soil, caliche layers, and it's on a north slope, and so I kill more things by overwatering. This last winter, I lost a number of things. Remember January? We had those snows in January, and it just stayed there, and it was cold, and just stayed soggy wet. My soil's loaded up with water, and the cold just allowed things to rot. It had been there for years. There's nothing I could do about that. It's environment. Nature just said, today, I'm going to thin things out for you so you can plant some new stuff this January, and they did. But a lot of things came through. I can't grow a manzanita to save me. I wish I could. I love manzanita. But I've killed 5. I generally have Ken's 2 strikes you're out theory. But at Ken's house, we have 5 strikes and I'm still out. Trying to figure out how to manipulate the soil so I can have a manzanita. Just my backyard's set up for it. This is a new plant. We crossed Rudbeckia, coneflower, or black-eyed Susan. We use the common names. We crossed those 2 plants together. We come out with Ebeckia. It's a funky name. I wish we had a better name for it, but is that impressive? This is not an pollinator. It has nothing to do with the class. It's just new and cool and neat. I know that gardeners come to a pollinator class. I mean, you guys, you've been defined as hardcore gardeners because you care about helping, pretty, how do I make things go? Well, that's this one. This one probably would be a very good bird attractor because it's going to set seed that they'll come in and digest or harvest. But gosh, that's just pretty. Tall, probably just knee high or so. Short, it's going to be pretty short. Rebecca, you can take a look at the tag later, but basically it's a cross between a coneflower and a black-eyed Susan, which are 2 very, very good perennials for here. But I get bored with plants sometimes. because I've seen the same thing over and over. So I get excited when I see something new. I go, oh, that's kind of neat. This one I planted, I pulled out. I just put this in last week. My pansies have all died. The violas have died. All that spring bloomer stuff, they didn't like that heat from a couple weeks ago. They just went, I am too hot. I'm out of here. Boom, and they collapsed like that. I couldn't give them enough water. There's nothing I could do. So my containers look pretty rough. And so I pulled all those things out to make room, and I'm plugging things like this in. I noticed the hummingbirds love this plant, and it will have hundreds of flowers from now through fall. This is called Cuphea, C-U-P-H-E-A, Cuphea. Just a nice little pollinator attractor, and it's just pretty enough to be at the front edge of a pot. I've got some dusty miller and some other stuff behind it. I had to cut back my snapdragons so they're green, but they're not pretty. I'll put this on the front edge, and all of a sudden your eye is drawn to that, and so are the hummingbirds. Cuphea. I would say if you're into butterflies, you want more monarchs, you want more swallowtails, you want more painted ladies, you want more, plant some of these. This is called Penta, P-E-N-T-A. It's a great summer bloomer. We don't sell these in the spring because it's one that waits. It has no interest in spring. It loves heat and sun, and it just likes it hot. So this is comes in pinks and reds and a lot of different colors, but you'll find butterflies all over this. They just can't resist it. It's like delicious to them. So Penta is a go-to for you all. I would say it's an annual flower, so I'm not going to look gorgeous till mid-November or so, and then it's going to die out, and then you have to come plant it again. But I guarantee you we'll have more of these at Waters Garden Center. If you want more next summer, this is a summer plant you'll see show up every June, July. It's when this plant shows up with pentas. And then another one, this is a native. It's called Yarrow. Now our native Yarrow is more whites and yellows, and it does very well. It's also a pollinator. Things are just attracted to it, especially butterflies. We're trying, again, it's so hardy. It does so well here. We're trying to introduce new colors. So we've got paprikas. What's the name of this? Desert Eve Rose. I mean, that's a great name. So again, just as hardy, but the flower is a different color. The native one has more of a silver foliage. This one's got more green. So you can play with it. They're all very, very tough. Perennial. Plant it once. Mine seem to get out about this big around, about 3 feet around. And then they just seem to max out and they'll start to reseed, come up in places. Just naturally in my own yard. In fact, I plant that with this one quite often. I'll plant these together because they get same size, same height, and they're complementary with colors, and they just look good together, and they'll come up about the same time frame. This blooms in spring, this blooms in summer. So you've got your seasonality helping out pollinators each season. They'll need something to snack on. Rabbits don't eat the sage. Rabbits will eat some of these. They generally don't like the native, the silver gray foliage. They don't like those. Sometimes they eat the greens. It depends on which rabbit reads the list of resistive. Some of the rabbits don't like it. Some of them go, it's the greatest thing ever. I think it depends on how much they have to naturally eat around the yard. They'd rather eat anything else, but they're not going to starve. It's that kind of thing. The native is yellow and white. Yellow or white, depends on where they're at, is the native yarrow that you'll see blooming. There's a couple different varieties that grow wild here. Same with the penstemon. You'll have several reds and pinks and whites showing up. There's quite a few that grow here. Also, you could throw in there yuccas, agaves. Those are all pollinators. If you like, I kind of lump hummingbirds in the pollinator. In my mind, they're kind of in the same class. They go around from flower to flower, enjoying the nectar. And so I just naturally benefit by having more butterflies and become more bees. So I don't have trouble pollinating my squash. I've got more zucchinis right now I know what to do with. I think you can feed the world. We could solve world hunger if just each individual planted one zucchini plant. Because you'll have more than you can use, you got to give it away. They're harvesting, they're actually maturing faster than I can pick them. Really a great problem. I love grilling zucchini. Oh my gosh, my mouth's watering. You must be hungry. Honeysuckle. It's one that blooms very early in spring. It's an evergreen vine. You could also use this as a ground cover. Used often as erosion control, and that rain sort of wash things out. We'll plug these in the holes because it's very deep rooted, very sturdy plant, and so we'll just encourage it to grow up that hillside. Okay, and then let's see what else I got. Rose of Sharon. I should mention this. I like Russian sage. It's the number one selling, putting 2 kids through college just by selling Russian sage. We sell a lot of it. Myself, I don't care for it as much. I would never plant a large Russian sage. It's a nice blue flower. It's a pollinator. It's a great plant. It's hardy as can be, but it's so aggressive. And I don't want to work that hard to maintain my yard. I do plant some Russian sage. They're short though. We're coming out with dwarf varieties. So lacy blue. It has a fancy name to it. That's probably a dwarf. We're trying to figure out how to control it so it's not as aggressive. Doesn't seed as much, doesn't run. This one's called Agastache. This one is similar in hardiness to Russian sage, but we're coming up with different colors, and it's very, very easy to maintain. It doesn't ever overgrow its space. You could put it right in the middle of a flower bed, and it would just keep its bounds. Whereas if you put a Russian sage in the middle of an actual flower bed, it would take over. You had nothing left but Russian sage within like 1 year. This guy is equally as hardy, but it just has the same kind of bloom cycle, same season, but it stays shorter. You've got more flower color, but it's called Agastache. And the exact name of this one, Summer Love Agastache. There's several colors down there, but it will keep blooming like this now through fall. And it'll die back to the ground. You whack it off, comes back fresh every summer. So Agastache, I think we need to plant more Agastache just so we don't have to work so hard out in the landscape. Animals don't eat that, so you're fine to grow and it's fine. So a good companion with that would be this guy. Catmint is a little bit shorter with the blue. This is a little bit taller. So if you're doing a bed, put this towards the back side of the bed, this on the front side. You've always got something of interest. This will bloom in the spring, this blooms in the summer. Those are things that we can help you design or get your seasonality, your rotation of flowers correct. Because sometimes we front load with spring bloomers because we're shopping in spring, and then the rest of our seasons look empty. You need to focus on each of the seasons, especially if you're focusing on pollinators. You need something to snack on or eat or throughout all the seasons. Yeah.
Is the Agastache full sun?
Full sun, yeah. Bright hot sun. Okay, and then lastly, I'll leave you, well, I guess 2. I'm having more fun. I'll show you this just because it's so famous in summer. Anyone know what that is? Crepe myrtle. They actually do very well here. Not like in the south. We don't get as big, they don't get as tall or as aggressive, but if you've got a full sun in like blistering hot, everything else dies in that spot. It is so hot. Plant crepe myrtle. It loves that. It's a big shrub. It'll get up naturally about head high or so, more kind of vase shaped, kind of like a lilac or forsythia size. It's that size shrub. And then you can count on it to have these fluorescent flowers to it. This one I'm planting more and more of in my own yard. This is called St. John's wort. Let's see if they give it a better name than that. Nope. St. John's wort. I don't like that name. I just like the wort. It should not be in a great plant's name. This is so drought hardy. Animals don't eat it. It's got a spring bloom that turns into these beautiful berries. You can see it's still blooming here. The pollinators love. It's starting from the berries. These berries will be as bright as the flower. It'll stay on there through winter, basically. And then it comes back and does it again next spring. It is an amazing little plant. Gets up about knee-high or so. So very easy to maintain and very drought hardy. Animals don't eat it. It's a great plant for here. It just starts to bloom just after the spring season. So just after the spring rush, most gardeners are in. Then these start to show off. and it's just past the cycle. So we need to introduce these more and more into the landscape. But if you want native landscapes, St. John's wort's a great effect. We're trying to introduce more flavors and more colors. There's some that have orange berries, some that have red berries. The yellow is more the native common one, but we're trying to introduce more and more varieties. Let me also mention right now, since it is on pollinators, be careful how you treat your gardens, what you're treating your gardens with, what fertilizers you use, what insect killers you're using. Let me just show you a couple things that I'm doing to kind of, because I'm real sensitive to that. Plus I've got dogs, we got grandkids coming over. You just got to watch. Some things it doesn't matter, but this subject, it really, really matters. So I'm starting to find, this is my go-to bug killer, aphids, thrip, the smaller insects, all natural. That's the one we put together ourselves. Neem oil is the main ingredient, N-E-E-M. The organic gardeners, you know, that's like our #1 spray for organics. You could spray, it doesn't hurt beneficial insects, ladybugs, praying mantis. It only wipes out aphids. That kind of, I had aphids on my milkweed. They were the most beautiful aphids I've ever seen. They were this color, literally. They looked that color. I thought, did monarchs, did they lay eggs on my, what happened? I had to take a really close look going, what happened? And they were sneaking aphids. I sprayed them with this, obliterated within the day, they were gone. So all organic, you're not gonna hurt if you had caterpillars on it, it wouldn't hurt them, just took out the aphids. That just happened last week, so the insects are still coming at us. This is my first line defense. I always have this in the garden shed or in the garage, ready to go, but it's not very effective against the larger things. Right now we're starting to see squash bugs in our vegetables. So some of the bigger tomato worms, the great big green thing that digests your tomatoes, like eats all the foliage overnight, this is not strong enough to take them out. Okay? So there I switched to, I didn't bring it, Captain Jack's Dead Bug Brew. It's on the shelf. That's what I use for the bigger things. The big caterpillars, the great big, now be careful because it does kill caterpillars. So I would say be real careful with your watch what you're doing, but tomato worms are going to be thick. After this rain and with the warmth, watch your tomatoes. They are going to be, if you see little droppings, little black dots, that's an early sign, and then when the foliage actually disappears, Captain Jack's will take them out. Now if you could physically find them, pick them off, and then deal with them that way, or take pruners and prune them in two. I used to pick them off and give them to my boys when they were younger, going, here boys, play with these. Just make sure they're all dead. When you're done, they go, oh, okay. So you got to make sure, but you can't find them all. There's so many on a tomato that I'll tend to spritz them with the Captain Jack's just to keep them in check. It's also natural. It's an organic spray, so you can spray, I think, up to the day of harvest. So I'm starting to pick tomatoes now. So I'm real sensitive of what I'm spraying on my edibles. Captain Jack's I'm comfortable with, and it still takes out the squash bugs, the tomato worms, that kind of stuff. Mildew. After this rain, I predict within a week, we're gonna have this tidal wave of customers coming in with powdery mildew. It's a white film that coats the foliage, and this spore eats the sugars in the leaf. It'll literally kill the plant. Roses, dahlias, I mean, it'll go across. Red tip botania, like the #1 thing it likes to eat. Be careful what you spray. A lot of the fungicides are chemical. This one is organic, copper fungicide. You got a lot of pollinator kind of stuff. This one you're safe to spray on your pumpkins. I get powdery mildew on my pumpkins every year. Copper fungicide is the organic solution to that, to kind of skew it that way. I think you can, again, spray up to the day of harvest with copper fungicide. Okay, just watch. For my friends, I want you to be alert. Be aware when you're walking in the gardens, any kind of white hue to it, that's the spore starting to happen. But within a week to 10 days, the whole plant will be covered. Just know it's coming so you know what to look for. That's kind of what I want to come out for you. Okay. Lastly, organic weed killers. It's hard to find it's hard to find a weed killer that's not Roundup, basically, or glyphosate is the chemical that they use in that. Extremely dangerous. I mean, just kind of, you'd want to be careful what you spray, where you're spraying. Burnout is a new organic we brought in just for folks like you. So I'm switching my stuff from glyphosates to the Burnout. This is a very strong vinegar. I mean, stronger than you get off of Costco kind of thing. This is super concentrated vinegar. And they figured out how to add oil to it so it sticks, so you get a better burn factor. Much heavier kill, much better knockdown of your weeds. Takes out natives. Right now you'll find your morning glory, the wild morning glory, bindweed, will grow like crazy right now. It'll go from a little cute seedling to this big like overnight. Be aggressive on that because it will take over and it reseeds and wants to, there's a nuclear holocaust. There's only going to be bindweed and like ants left. So really watch that when it starts to be very aggressive right now when the rains start. Same with goat head. That's the one that's real, it only gets this tall, spreads out, and when you lift it up, you'll see hundreds of little tiny seeds with thorns on it. Goat head, when you walk on it, it will like pierce the dogs. They'll be wincing, going, I'm in pain, Mom, help me. That's goat head. It comes up this time of year. Get it before it seeds. Spray it with this kind of stuff, it'll wipe them right out. Okay?
What about if
It's going to burn, it's going to kill. If you hit it, it will die. This is pretty strong. I was amazed when I saw, because I've seen other vinegar products, and vinegar, quite honestly, doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work not at my standard. This one I was impressed with the strength and the label. It'll, if you hit it, it will, may not kill it, but it'll burn it right back to the roots where you got to start over again. Russian thistle, that one might be best just with a shovel or something. I don't know, that one's a hard one.
You pull it every
Bull,
time you see it.
yeah, let's just keep up on it. Same with horehounds. Those of you that have horses, like horses will eat everything in the corral except this gray looking horehound. That's one, just keep up on it. Don't let it be really aggressive right now. Just kind of watch that. The number one piece of advice I can give you right now, how are we doing on time? We got to be getting close, yeah. Lisa's giving me shut up. One bit of advice I can give you, the number one thing you can do for your pollinators, your landscape in general, fertilize ASAP with all-purpose plant food. This is not a water soluble, this is something you chuck on the ground. It's going to be hard for you gardeners to understand. Do not work it in. I want you to relax. Take it easy, just throw it on the ground. The rains are here. They will do all the work for you. Now some of you gardeners just can't accept that, so I'm going to allow you to rake it in if you want. For me, the last couple days, I've been trying to get ahead of the rain. I just threw it on the ground, I took my hand spreader and I walked around and I let the rain do its work. Last night, it's going to be magical. It'll increase the blooms, but it's important to put this on your entire landscape, especially the evergreens, pinyon pines, the junipers, things that are maybe have pressure from bark beetles, that kind of stuff. Get this on everything. At the front edge of the monsoons, you find you have better blooms, better health of your landscape. With that, well done. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.